Thank you for joining us. So welcome to our monthly Conservation Now webinar, where we put forward a conservation organization that is part of our network. So we're Conservation Optimism. We are an organization that tries to shift the narrative away from the doom and gloom towards something a bit more optimistic in the world of conservation, because we know that it can be a little bit sad and depressing, but we believe that one of the ways forward is to make sure that people have an optimistic viewpoint on this to actually take action and do something good for wildlife and nature and the environment. So we're really excited this month to be hosting Anish from Think Wildlife Foundation, who's going to be talking to us about the wildlife trade and cybercrime. We'll be adding in links throughout as we go. Make sure to check out the Conservation Optimism website for any future webinars. And also, if you're part of a conservation organization and you want to be part of the Conservation Now movement, make sure to check out our website as well, and we'll be adding in links. So the webinar is going to be about 40 minutes long, followed by lots of time for questions. So feel free to put them into the chat as we go along, or keep them at the end where you'll be able to ask them directly. But if not, I think Anish, feel free to take it away.
Hi, so I'm Anish. I just finished my undergraduate in zoology from the University of Manchester, and I'll be doing a master's in ecology at Imperial College. So I also founded Think Wildlife Foundation. So I founded this with Prakti, he's also on the call. So we founded this in 2020 during the pandemic. The main idea behind this was to raise funds for wildlife rehabilitation through e-commerce. So we raised about 20,000 rupees, which is about 200 pounds, for the rehabilitation of one temple elephant named Pari in the Wildlife SOS Rescue Center in Bangalore. We also are launching a campaign against the online wildlife trade. So this is the start of our campaign, and we also are doing a lot of research on the side. So yeah, today I'll be talking about how about trends in wildlife cybercrime and how you can help counter this. So what is wildlife cybercrime? So according to sites, it is any wildlife crime which is facilitated through use of information and communication technology, or any sort of application in a digital world. This includes the dark web, e-commerce websites such as eBay, and social media platforms such as Facebook. So the major advantage of internet is that it's accessible 24/7 and it is borderless. So, and it's also expanded so much in the last 15 years, allowing smugglers to have a much larger exposure to customers. So what are some trends in cybercrime? So this has been very hard to quantify, because obviously the internet has expanded so much in the recent years, and although organizations such as Traffic and IFO have regularly produced reports, these have varied significantly temporarily and regionally. So it's really hard to find global trends in wildlife cybercrime. Although there are some generic observations which can be inferred. So in 2014, IFO produced a report called Wanted, Dead or Alive. So it found that there were 33,000 specimens available in about 9,500 social media and e-commerce advertisements across 280 websites in 16 countries over a span of 6 weeks. One major observation is that majority of the advertisements were from species listed as Appendix 1 or 2 by sites. So Appendix 1 and 2 are species which are basically banned from trade internationally because through very severe regulations. So where by IFO, Traffic, and even smaller researchers have found similar observations that majority of the online trade happens with Appendix 1 and 2 species. The main products which are sold online are ivory and reptiles. In the 2014 report, it found that about 32% of the advertisements were either ivory or suspected ivory, and 26% of reptiles. Similar trends have been observed across reports. But one observation was that ivory trade did reduce significantly from the from IFOS 2008 report. It was 73% in 2008 and was only about 35% in 2014. However, this has varied significantly because in 2021, an IFOS report based only in America found that about 50%, about 48% of the products were ivory. Amongst reptiles, turtles and tortoises are the main products sold as pets. So the thing with ivory trade online is that there's a lot of ambiguity. So there are numerous species from which ivory can be taken from, including elephants, walruses, hippos, and whales. So obviously there's a lot of, since it covers a lot of species, there's a lot of different regulations regarding their trade of ivory. Plus, traders can really circumvent around law enforcement through the use of code words to cover up the ivory trade. Also, instead of selling ivory directly, they can make ivory derived products. So tracking ivory is obviously very hard over the internet. In terms of regionally, the report found that 50%, 56% of the products were found on Chinese websites. 43% of the websites the study focused on were based in Russia, although they only contributed about 8% of the products, which is quite surprising. So also one major challenge across such reports is that there's a significant amount of ambiguity with the legal rules. I mean, the legality of trade, because sites only manages the international trade of wildlife products, and each country has significant amount of domestic rules regarding trade. Like for example, in India, local species, there are very strict rules with local species, but exotic species like capuchins and macaques, there's basically no rules regarding those. So it is really easy for traders to find loopholes across this on social media, and then they also circumvent law enforcement agencies by posting very blurred images, using code words, and manipulating the law in such a way that consumers do not realize that they are breaking laws. And in fact, that most in the 2021 report by F1 America found that only about 0.6% of the advertisements, only about 0.6% of the cases, the traders could actually prove that they had valid certification to trade the animal products. So what is the role of social media in the online wildlife trade? So till about 2010, e-commerce platforms such as eBay, a few local agencies in China really handle the wildlife trade. But because of various initiatives such as a coalition to end wildlife online trafficking online, even eBay's personal laws, wildlife trade on these e-commerce platforms have really dwindled. So that has really shifted the onus onto social media, especially because in the last 5-10 years, social media has become a very important part of everyone's lives. So in 2016, the Wildlife Justice Commission did an investigation in Vietnam in 2016, which found that on Facebook and WeChat, wildlife trade worth $53.1 million was being traded. So social media is a very convenient way for the wildlife trade, simply because it allows for effective and easy communication between the buyer and the seller. Also, it is really hard to track the online wildlife trade through personal messaging, especially with the whole agenda about privacy, especially on WhatsApp and encryption and stuff. So it is really hard to track the wildlife trade through social media. Um, However, this is really variable across countries. So in a 2018 report found that in UK, France, Russia, and Germany, only about 6.2 of the wildlife product advertisements were based on social media. But meanwhile, in China, the 2014 report suggested that 50% of the trade occurred on social media platforms such as Twitter, WeChat, QQ, and Baidu Tieba, which are some local brands. In fact, even in Russia, their main platform called Wiki.com, in 2014, there was only about 4 posts in 6 weeks about wildlife products, and this increased to 10-fold to 43 in 2018. And so social media does not only affect wildlife trade through the buying and selling of illegal products, but it really impacts the perception of exotic pets. So one study found that in increasing positive sentiment of exotic pets really increases their desirability in consumers. Um, and one more study found that in YouTube, videos showing positive interactions between exotic primates and wildcat pets uh, increased the sentiment, improved the sentiment towards the pet significantly. So this can be inferred that social media can be used as a method to advertise the trade of exotic pets indirectly, and obviously through these indirect methods, there's only so much that law enforcement agencies um, can do. Um, and the thing is, the response from social media platforms has been very underwhelming. Facebook joined a coalition to end wildlife trade online in 2018 and has been implementing various policies to ban and regulate the trade of wildlife species listed as Appendix 1 and 2 of sites on the platform. But in 2020, a WWF report found that on Facebook, there were the trade of about 2,100 wild animals from 94 species in Myanmar alone in 5 months. Various smaller reports have found that even in America and Canada and the UAE, the wildlife trade on Facebook has in fact increased after the after Facebook regulations. So, and in fact, that the regulations uh, has caused much controversy because it's led to a debate whether uh, free speech to what extent is free speech reliable, because obviously Facebook wants to self-regulate their own social media platforms, but evidently they're not doing it very efficiently because such serious crimes are still occurring on Facebook. So many argue that the government should be more the governments and law agencies should be more proactive in handling social media, not letting them self-regulate in such serious matters. So what is being done? So in 2018, three major NGOs, WWF, IFO, and Traffic, launched this network called the Coalition to End Wildlife Trafficking Online. It currently has 47 member tech companies, which includes Facebook, eBay, and various uh, social media and e-commerce platforms. So uh, it's it aimed at reducing wildlife trade online by 80% by 2020. Results have so far been mixed. This infographic shows the progress which the coalition has had since 2018. So 11 million posts of illegal wildlife have been blocked or removed. About 2,300 staff have been trained, and yeah, 47 countries have been operating around. But even in China, for example, 7 out of the 22 e-commerce platforms have banned the trade of wildlife products on their platforms, and this has had a very positive impact. So in 2015, at its peak in August 2015, there were about 2,400 wildlife products listed on these 7 platforms. This had fallen to about only 235 in October 2017 after these companies had banned the products. Uh, but then again, with in terms of Ivory, this has been very ambiguous. So after ePay banned the trade of Ivory on its platform in around 2010, I think. So there was a major drop in Ivory trade in Canada, Germany, France, and Netherlands, and Belgium. For example, in Canada, it fell from about 134 advertisements, only 8. Similar numbers were noted in France and Netherlands. But the UK witnessed a 40% increase in the trade of wildlife products between 2008 and 2014. So yeah, the results have been ambiguous. Some say that the goal to reduce wildlife trade online by 80% uh, has been very ambitious, and because of that, efforts have been very dispersed. Uh, Obviously, many people say that social media brands such as Facebook have used the coalition to uh, just for namesake to show that they're actually doing work, while they're actually not, because obviously Facebook has come under much scrutiny. In fact, that after Facebook has and because of the nature of internet, where social media websites are ever growing, so when one major company puts some new laws, it's very easy for traders to shift to a newer and less scrutinized platform. So that is obviously going to be a very big challenge. And even with the development of AI, there's only so much that there's only to some extent where people can contribute, where wildlife can be limited on social media. Obviously, now countries are such as India, China, and even the EU have made a uh, lot of progress in terms of researching the extent of online wildlife trade, and even uh, processing a lot of rules to counter it. Um, and lot of private sector companies are getting involved in trying to develop AI technology to counter the wildlife trade. And also, um, although it's still COVID, we're still in the middle of the pandemic. Like a lot of stuff, uh, there's been a major shift from in the wildlife trade, as the world has gone into a more remote setting. Um, so yeah, the effect might be seen in a few years, but uh, there's been a generic trend observed that the wildlife trade has really started to grow online, especially because it's happening so much in the open through social media and e-commerce platforms. It's really impossible to know what goes on in the dark web, because that's one aspect where uh, obviously resources limit how much NGOs can really uh, infiltrate the wildlife trade on the dark web. So how can you help counter wildlife cybercrime? So the first thing is to report suspicious wildlife sales online. The coalition has the link will be provided at the end of the slide, and it'll be emailed to you. So the coalition has got a platform where you can report any suspicious wildlife sales online. This is a very simple form where you just have to fill up the species, um, the put a link where you saw the product, and what product was being sold. Like if it's an elephant, if it's ivory, if it's tiger skin, as such. And it's very important that you do report any suspected wildlife sales, because obviously no matter how developed AI is, and no matter how efficient the various projects are to uh, counter this, uh, wildlife trade online will go unnoticed. The internet is it's just too big. Uh, then for people who want to be more involved in uh, countering wildlife trade online, there's the coalition has the wildlife cyber spotter program. So this is a uh, this is about a 6-week program done by the coalition. Uh, so about 8 volunteers are selected after you apply. Again, a link will be provided. So all these volunteers are trained by experts at the coalition to uh, identify uh, advertisements and the products being sold in advertisement. So uh, after the training, the volunteers are provided with one specific social media platform, and which they have to monitor for about 4 hours a week for about 6 weeks. And this will be reported directly to the coalition, uh, who will then verify this and also collaborate with their member for one of the with a relevant member of the coalition to remove such posts. So far, it's been quite effective. In about 11 rounds, they have successfully removed 10,000 articles of illegal wildlife products on social media. And there's been about 94 across 24 platforms with a 94% accuracy. So obviously, citizen science is becoming very important in the conservation field. And I think this is a very new, encountering wildlife trade online. Citizen science can really be utilized a lot for this. Then obviously there's the wildlife crime group. So this is a platform where scientists, conservationists, people involved in the IT sector can really collaborate with various research projects, conservation ideas, and discuss research ideas and collaborate on projects to counter wildlife crime. There's been a lot being discussed about remote sensing, AI, and etc. on the platform. So, you don't need to be involved in the conservation sector directly, even if you're only involved in the IT sector with limited knowledge of the wildlife sector. You can really get involved with this because obviously the wildlife crime is a very interdisciplinary section. So it requires people from various backgrounds. So some other ways you can tackle wildlife crime is through corporate partnerships, because obviously NGOs always lack fund and resources. So there are quite a few organizations which are working with NGOs to develop various technological solutions towards countering wildlife trade online. So if you're in the IT sector, private sector, this is something you can look at maybe as a business idea or maybe as a CSR project. Then many different government and NGOs are also running wildlife crime technology competitions. USAID, Nat Geo, Wild Labs, and even the UK government have launched similar competitions where the best ideas have been given assistance and resources to where participants provide a blueprint and the best ideas are provided with resources and guidance to develop this into a more feasible solution. There's also a lot of wildlife crime courses which can really help, and you should attend them because obviously the wildlife traders really exploit the lack of knowledge in the of the general public to trade exotic pets and wildlife products across the world. So I think ACAMs and fintech really are really productive platforms for you to learn about the financial and legal aspects of the wildlife trade, and it's very important to be more aware because obviously a lot of NGOs are running awareness programs, and if you're aware about the wildlife crime products, you can participate in it significantly. Yeah, so that's the end of my presentation. I'm up for questions.
Hi, Anish, thank you so much. I'm just jumping in. So thank you for the presentation, it was super interesting, and you've had lots of questions. So I have collected all of them, and I don't have the names that are linked to the questions, but I will read you the first one that I got. So the first question was, what is the way to stop the trade in wildlife? I mean, how do we reach out and inform people? Who do we want to inform? And that person was saying there's so many different kind of trades. So yeah, would you have any tips on that? It's quite a big question.
So I guess the best way is to help raise awareness about the exotic pet trade, because that's, as I mentioned something about earlier about the opinion, how positive sentiment of a species can help can increase likelihood of exotic pet trade. So on social media, a lot of people post stuff about, like in Thailand, people post photos of themselves in with drugged tigers, and people post photos going in elephant circuses and elephant rides. Similar thing in UAE where all people walking with pet tigers and lions get a lot of attention, and because of this, a very positive sentiment towards the exotic pets are there, and this increases the interest uh, in owning these exotic pets. So that's one aspect that we can, we as people who are not very involved in the wildlife crime industry can can contribute significantly, because majority of people who do share such posts on social media, who are actually interested in who actually get interested by watching this social media posts about exotic pets, they are the ones who are most who they are the ones who are most oblivious towards the impact of exotic pet trade. So it's really important to share like how you can. It's really important to educate these type of people about the impacts of the exotic pet trade, um, because that's the most direct form. Then obviously, uh, social media, like social media is a very powerful tool. Although right now there's been a lot of scrutiny regarding the involvement of social media in the illegal wildlife trade. So when you see uh, posts about the wild about which you think are uh, suspected wildlife trade, you can inform the person about who's doing it, because they might not be a criminal. There might be someone who might just be sharing it out of a lack of knowledge. So it's really small things like this, and obviously you can volunteer with with wildlife crime awareness programs run by various NGOs. Um, these come at various times, at various points. If you find such campaigns online, uh, you can figure out ways how to contribute. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And I think there was a kind of follow-up question to that by someone else, but it's kind of linked. So the question was, the person was interested in the fact that you mentioned, how social media can affect the sentiment of people about exotic pets, what you just talked about. Do you have any examples or studies about this? And will you be able to share them maybe in the chat, or send people to read more about the topic?
Yeah, I did read about a couple of papers. So there was one about the one paper I spoke about was the one about how YouTube videos was showing positive interactions between the pet owners and exotic pets, such which it mostly focus on pet primates and pet wildlife, pet wildcats. So positive interactions really did increase the sentiment towards these pets. And then previous studies, which happened much earlier than this study. The study I think was placed in 2018. Studies in 2010 found that positive sentiment did increase desirability of exotic pets. I will send the links to you, and then you can forward it to people who you can forward it to everyone who's attending.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. We will do that. One of a bit more of a personal question, but why have you decided to dedicate yourself to this cause? Why are you so passionate about illegal wildlife trade?
I think because firstly, I've always been interested in species extinctions and wildlife conservation since I was a kid. So obviously, growing up, we always hear about the ivory trade and the rhino horn trade and stuff. So that's always been an interest. And then in recent years, there was COVID, and obviously, COVID really put a big highlight into the pangolin trade and the illegal trade of bats. And obviously, pangolins are the most trafficked species in the world. And regardless of whether COVID was manufactured in a lab or whether it came from a wet market, COVID at the end of the day is a zoonotic disease, which is basically a disease which gets spread from animals to humans. So at the end of the day, it's a zoonotic disease. It really highlights how vulnerable and interdependent we are on humans, and especially recently, there have been a lot of studies which have focused on how severe ecological, how severe the impacts of wildlife trade can be, because like so far most studies have only focused on how the illegal wildlife trade causes species extinction, but then again Africa has lost about 15,000 lose about 15,000 elephants a year, and elephants are one of the most critical keystone species in Africa and Asia. They provide so many ecological services such as for sea dispersal, providing new habitats for reptiles and dung beetles, and also changing grasslands and forest habitats and preventing forest fires, controlling forest fires. So there's such a knock-on effect of the illegal wildlife trade. So I think because as a part of my undergraduate degree, I really have understood a lot of this more intricate aspects of the wildlife trade, which has made me more interested in it.
Awesome, thank you. I think there's a few questions that are related to each other, so I'll cluster them together. Someone was asking, I've seen a lot of people I know personally who own snakes and chameleons, and when asked, they said they bought it online. So how do common people like them know if they're buying their exotic pets legally or if it is trafficked wildlife? And I would say that probably linked to a question as well that was asking, how do we make people more aware of the fact that, they might be buying things that are actually illegal wildlife?
So obviously there's never going to be a clear-cut solution. But the first thing is, if you do want to buy an exotic pet, make sure that you ask for illegal documents, because although wildlife crime is not looked upon well, there are some exceptions. So I think in general, sites species listed under Appendix 2 of sites, I think they can be traded if they're bred in captivity. And even in India, elephants which are Schedule 1 animals in the private laws, in national laws, they can be traded if you have the correct certification and are not captured from the wild. So there are some rules which allow the trade of exotic pets, but it's really important that if you do want to buy reptiles or any form of exotic pets, you make sure you have the correct documentation. There's a lot of fake documentation which occurs, and a lot of the reports from IFA, Traffic, and WWF have found that that many of the online traders have false documents. So that's obviously going to be a big challenge, but yeah, that's the easiest way is to make sure that you have the correct documentation. If you have any doubts, it's best to consult it online, or if you have any contacts, try and contacts who are more aware about this program, try and contact them about the legality of the trade. And regarding the question about how can you make more people more aware, so obviously putting the blame on them will not help, because they'll get very defensive. So it's more like you can just try and explain the consequences of the illegal wildlife trade. So yeah, that's a very gray area, and how to handle those situations. The more depends on, I guess it's more personal, case-to-case basis.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And could you tell us a bit more about what you're doing with your organization in terms of the type of awareness and activities that you run as well?
So in terms of illegal wildlife trade, this is our first outreach event we're hosting. Obviously, we have a blog which is running up quite well, and we are doing quite a bit of outreach to our blog and social media. In my university, Imperial, so I am planning a few outreach events there also. At a more scientific level, like in more micro level, I'm trying to co-author a paper and publish it on the trends in illegal wildlife trade, based on it's going to be a systematic literature review based on all the reports published by big NGOs, by in scientific journals and such. And yeah, this is a very this is a very new project by us, and we're just at the start, and obviously we're students, so it's a completely new area for us. Other than illegal wildlife trade, we also are running a similar outreach program to raise awareness and funding to help support the rehabilitation of captive elephants and dancing bears and wildlife rescue. So this is really, and we have an e-commerce website where we can raise funds, where we raise funds for the rehab of these animals, rescued animals and animals suffering from injuries or captivity or illegal wildlife trade. I'll send a link to the e-commerce website. People in India, please do contribute, because it's for a good cause.
Amazing. Well, and I mean, you've got lots of people on this talk, so I'm sure, you know, if people want to reach out to you and do collaborations as well, they can do that. Someone was asking a question about, do you know of any wildlife crime course that people can enroll in? And again, that's something that you might be able to provide us afterwards that we can send into the email.
I have done one by ACAMS. It's a pretty popular legal platform which provides courses not only in the wildlife trade but uh, other similar topics like human trafficking, weapons, and other legal aspects. And there are a couple of more which are run, I think, by WWF. So I will obviously provide the links with you.
Yeah, awesome. And I think someone was asking as well about Facebook. So I know that's something you mentioned earlier. And they were asking what online regulations already exist about wildlife trade on Facebook and what would be the best solution?
So in 2019, the most direct law was that they banned the trade of uh, wildlife and wildlife products listed under Appendix 1 and 2 of CITES. There are a few more policies we're not very aware of, which also regulate uh, uh, the wildlife trade. But obviously, there's no point having laws if you cannot enforce them, because Facebook is really having issues with enforcement. Uh, I guess they can really invest, because obviously Facebook's a very successful social media platform. The Meta and stuff they can really invest in human resources and AI resources to try and counter the wildlife trade on Facebook. It's also very important that the users are also report whatever they see, because it doesn't matter, as I said, it doesn't matter how efficient the solution is by the companies. Uh, then it is so big that uh, you can't help but you can the trade will be, so some products will be missed on social media, on Facebook, regardless. So it's very important that even the lay user reports anything suspicious.
Oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, reporting is so important. I'm going to do two more questions and I think then we will wrap up. Someone asked, again, I mean, it's a hard question because it's kind of like forecasting into the future. But they were asking what changes to wildlife crime might we expect in the next few years because of the COVID related economic problems? Do you have any idea of what the forecast might be on that?
So sorry, could you just repeat?
Yes, so because of COVID creating lots of economic issues in different countries, how do you think that might impact on the trends on wildlife crime?
Okay, so those uh, those trends are already happening. So I think as soon as the first lockdown happened in India, wildlife poaching increased significantly in a lot of the tiger reserves, because uh, for them, for the local communities which are quite poor, um, wildlife tourism was a major source of income. And because wildlife tourism shut down because of COVID with the various lockdowns, millions of people were left unemployed. And uh, poachers normally local poachers, they only get into wildlife, right? Because they need because they are poor and they need like a livelihood. And the major crime syndicates, they really exploit this. So like Al Qaeda in Bangladesh has funded locals in Assam, in Northeast India, to participate in wildlife trade. They provide them with AK-47s to really hunt to really hunt rhinos and other such uh, fauna. So because of the lack of jobs, uh, there has been a significant shift towards poaching. Uh, Even one study found that food insecurity has increased poaching and bushmeat trade in a lot of indigenous communities. So obviously, because uh, the economy is still not recovering. In fact, the economy has become is worsening in the recent months. It's becoming worse. Inflation is hitting, and a lot of countries having crises. So uh, obviously, the indigenous and the local communities are the ones who are going to face the brunt of this economic crisis we're going through right now. And it's likely that more people will resort to the wildlife trade. And despite China uh, promising us a lot of uh, stricter regulations towards towards managing the wildlife trade, there's not much been done. And China's one of the main sources, most of the wildlife, majority of wildlife products do end up in China or America or the Middle East. And since China has such a big demand, the fact that despite the pandemic, they've not really done much to counter the wildlife trade has been fairly disappointing.
Yeah. Yeah. So the last question I have for you here on my list was how to reach government officials about this problem and how much do they need to be involved in these issues?
So obviously, I can't talk about all countries, but I know for a fact that in India, there's been quite a bit of work by the government to counter wildlife trade. We have our Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, which is which has been doing quite a amount of good work. Obviously, it's quite hard in India being such a big country. There's different challenges, but the government is trying quite hard. Even with the legal aspects in the EU and India and in EU, India, and parts of China have started changing the laws. America, despite having so many laws, is still the wildlife trade still happens in America, despite America having one of the strongest legal frameworks to counter wildlife trade. So reaching out to government officials, I guess just through social media, contacting them is the best way, because at the end of the day, many of them are just normal conservationists who are working in the government, and they're very open to ideas. So just contacting them through email or social media is going to be a very easy way to contact them, I guess.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I mean, I've thrown a lot of questions at you. So yeah, thank you so much for this talk. I've seen that all the info about Think Wildlife Foundation have been posted in chat. So if anyone wants more info, you've got everything. You've got Instagram, LinkedIn, the website,